Hey, so tonight for our dream tending group, I wanted to talk about this whole dream phenomena referred to as mall world, which references gate programs and group sevens. So I did this short presentation just to explain what this is before I open things up for us all to share our opinions, our experiences, before we dive into our traditional kind of dream sharing and projective interpretation session. So let me share my screen. I even made a little PowerPoint for this just to kind of explain what I wanted to explain without forgetting. Um, oh boy. Okay, here we go. Let me just open myself up here. All right. So this is actually a map that I've seen floating around the internet from individuals who are experiencing this phenomena called mall world dreams. There seems to be repeating themes of, a mall with escalators that seem to go on forever or go nowhere. Roads around the town are kind of wonky, very steep. Um, Somewhat non-functional. There seems to be areas, like ocean with theme parks and caves and campgrounds and all kinds of weird stuff. There's also connected to the mall seems to be a hospital, a school. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So this is just one of the shared mall world dream spaces. There's very similar maps floating around on the internet, but mall world is been like a phenomena. Yes, I went down the rabbit hole and I drank the Kool-Aid because as I started watching these videos on TikTok, Instagram, um, where else was I seeing them? YouTube. You watch one or two and then all of a sudden you're getting spammed with them, right? Because, your phones and your devices are tracking what you're looking up. But it did trigger a response in me. I did have some memories. It was really kind of odd. So I thought let's dive into this tonight as a group. And I would love to hear feedback and opinions from everybody else. So, Mall World Group 7 and Gate Program. I'm going to make this a very short presentation, I promise. Okay, so Gate students, this was Mall World, and somehow we're starting to remember it. This is a pretty recent phenomenon. It's affecting a lot of people that were in elementary school in the 80s, up through mid 90s. So the mall world theory is a phenomena where people claim to share recurring dreams of a vast, empty, and often unsettling indoor mall or similar liminal space. So theories are ranging from psychological explanations like social contagion and collective memory to more fantastical ideas like a shared dream space, a higher dimensional projection, or even alien communication. So, common characteristics of mall world, really is locational. Participants are reporting these dreams that take place in a place like a mall. There seems to be theme park and school structures kind of built around it or into it. Um, the dreams often have an eerie feeling of nostalgia, triggering your Six of Cups response, right? There seems to be a little confusion. There seems to be a little emptiness, despite the presence of non threatening, like background people. Some reoccurring elements that are mentioned a lot includes food courts, those staircases or escalators that seem to go nowhere, and one of the overwhelming ones I actually heard a lot about is this kind of huge endless bathroom with a lot of overflowing toilets, kind of a gross scene. But it was strange because I actually triggered some dream recall in me. I actually have had dreams of being in what seemed like an endless bathroom with all sorts of toilets, but they were all full or overflowing, and I needed to go, and I didn't because it was disgusting. So yeah, I kind of triggered a little bit of a response there with the toilets. So it has been linked to, some of these other conspiracy theories, like, the Disney utilidors, MK Ultra, Mall World seems to kind of be put into that bracket. So explanations and theories, the social contagion theory. This is a psychological explanation that, people are talking about these dreams online. And as this idea spreads and the features discussed that sort of gets incorporated into other people's dreams. So can it be like a dream virus, because of the discussion, really kind of being ramped up online about it and people sharing their experiences. There's the collective unconscious explanation. So some suggest it's a modern manifestation of Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious, where universal archetypes are shared by all humans. Um, could it be shared memory and symbolism, right? So another psychological perspective is that there are these like reflections of common experiences. Malls are very familiar and symbolic, especially for us that were in elementary in the 80s, right? Um, there is that familiarity. It is very symbolic. It's a modern environment, and it can evoke feelings of being both, a place of commerce, but also kind of like a strange liminal space, right? Some of the more fantastical theories is that it is a shared higher dimensional space or an alternate reality, that it is a form of communication, possibly from aliens, that it is a generated space like a punishment routine or a testing ground, suggesting we are in some kind of simulation, or that it's like a virus, a computer virus, but it's affecting our ability to access our liminal spaces. I found the alien one interesting. I have had strange, when I was a child, I did have one particular experience. I think I shared that in the group before of, an UFO and, us having to run and hide in the house and then kind of losing some time and some weird shit. And then a bad dream that followed about my mom. But the virus idea is interesting too. That this could be some sort of like, I don't know, like dream virus. Well, how are we infected? So let's talk about that. These are just some of the main theories. I want to hear your guys' theories after I'm done here. All right. I don't know if you guys remember these symbols: gifted and talented, gate, gifted and talented. For me in the 80s, it was called I Am Special. Let's talk about what these gifted and talented programs were. So the I Am Special program, it had many different names. It was in the 80s. It referred to the gifted and talented education or gifted and talented GT programs that were very common in elementary schools during that era. So those programs are designed to provide advanced learning for students who scored high on IQ tests or other academic assessments. And oftentimes they were pulled out of regular classes for these accelerated instructional learning sessions or these special projects in separate classrooms with other kids or sometimes alone. So the structure of the program, these GATE programs typically identified students as young as 6 or 7 and pulled them from, like I said, their regular classrooms for a portion of the day or certain days of the week. The curriculum was often self-directed and based on individual interests, sometimes involving very advanced work with a specialized or trained specialist teacher. Common memories. So some participants recall specific, sometimes very strange activities like listening to audio tapes in a dark room, being bused to other locations for lessons or strange field trips, drinking strange pink liquids, which may have been a form of fluoride or part of a special exercise. And in terms of purpose, while the intention was to provide a challenge for advanced students, some, later on reflected on how these programs also were very isolating. So it may not have had, provided what they were, it may have created more problems than not. But so who remembers these tangrams? I remember these. I remember these puzzle assignments. I call them logic puzzles, right? So let's talk about that. So there is this popular theory that the public schools gifted and talented education programs from the 80s to the mid 90s was a CIA operation. Let me get into it. I know some of you are like, oh, here we go with conspiracy theory. But so this theory is that, how do I lost my place. Boy, I'm out of it today. I'm trying to talk about it and I'm getting all confused. Conflates the school program with an actual but separate CIA project called the Gateway Program. So the CIA did have a program called Gateway. It was also known as the Stargate Project. And so the Gifted and Talented Education Program was a legitimate, widespread public school initiative designed to provide that advanced educational opportunity for kids with high IQs and unique abilities. It was funded at local and state levels and federal. The curriculum focused on problem solving, critical thinking, advanced subjects like foreign languages or complex games, kind of like what I was showing you here. Now, the Gateway program, the Stargate project, that was a declassified U.S. Army Defense Intelligence Agency research program. So, a DIA program. So, it also involved the CIA. It explored psychic phenomena such as remote viewing, which is the ability to see distant events or locations psychically. Um, the project used techniques involving sound, meditation, altered states of consciousness to explore human potential. It was shut down in 1995 after a CIA commission reviewed it and found that it was not useful in their intelligence operations, or so they say. So there was a link made between the two programs, and that was stemming primarily from many people recalling very unusual tests involving headphones, audio tapes with strange sounds, unique visual puzzles as part of their gifted program entrance requirements or examinations. And so these specific memories are very similar to the descriptions of the audio techniques used in the actual CIA Army Gateway program. So a lot of people have kind of theorized there's a connection there, right? Makes sense. So some of the things here. So, just to kind of see if you guys remember any of this, I remember doing these decoding exercises. I do remember the weird wonky headphones. A lot of people online, that's saying it was not a hearing test. And how could it be a hearing test if you had to do it more than once in a short period of time? Um, it was used for development purposes. I remember some weird things. I don't remember these cards specifically, the Zener cards. I remember doing things with bears where I had to guess the color of the bear without looking at it and putting it in a bag. Kind of weird, right? I remember that. And I was very young. I was in elementary school. I don't remember the pink drink phenomena. A lot of people online are talking about that, this pink drink. Some people are saying, well, they were making us do fluoride washes or flushes, but there is something kind of odd about it. I don't remember that, but who knows, right? I mean, I really don't know. I do kind of remember. It's weird how the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, did I have a pink drink? I don't know. It's very strange. But anyway, um, I'm just trying to see if maybe this stimulates any memory on your guys' part. So, what were they testing us for, right? Here's a little 1980s classroom. I am special. Many participants, first of all, suffered from behavioral issues afterwards. I am one of them. There's lots of Reddits where people that were in these GATE programs were troublemakers and ended up, getting in trouble or, going to juvie or whatever. I'm one of those. So after these programs, there are quite a few participants that found themselves in and out of trouble and even institutionalized during their childhood for brief times after being in a GATE program. And that's true for me. I was an I am special through fifth grade. And then I started getting in trouble in sixth grade. And at the beginning of seventh grade is when I stole my first car. So this interesting person that I found online, she says, if you were in the gifted and talented program in your school in the 80s or 90s, how's your ADHD, high functioning anxiety, and perfectionist based procrastination going? And I thought that was funny because that sounds pretty accurate from people from our era. Bonus if you're also the oldest daughter and now fully immersed in your own spiritual journey. So it kind of that very much resonated with me. I'm the oldest. I've been on a spiritual awakening journey. I was very much a troublemaker, and she's been through the exact same thing. And I thought, well, that's, kind of wild. She was in the program. And again, like a year and a half out being out of it, all of a sudden weird shit happened. She was the oldest sibling. And then, she's also spiritually awakening. I just thought it was an interesting correlation. Is it connected to the GATE program? I don't know. I'm just throwing out some different what ifs. You guys, there's a lot of research out there. I just pulled a couple of screenshots. There's so much out there right now, but So like this guy here, just curious, how many people familiar with Mall World were in the GATE program during the 80s or 70s or 90s? What do you remember about your time spent in the program? Many people have similar shared experiences with this program, similar to the shared spaces in Mall World. So I'm curious. Um, and now here's another person. I believe I was part of an illegal government experiment while in elementary school. And again, I just grabbed these randomly. There's like tens of 20s of 30s of, I don't know, there's got to be hundreds of thousands of posts out there. But this individual says, when I was in third grade, I was part of this thing that I can't remember the name of, where twice a week, me and a few other kids, if wasn't ever average kids, it was always either kids at the top of the class or borderline special ed, would go into a classroom while all the other kids went to PE or library or music or whatever. And we would do these really weird tests. The teacher, who I never remember seeing at the school before, would have us wear headphones, and the voice would like say a series of numbers, and we would have to remember all the even numbers or odd numbers with more than 5 letters, or draw the shapes it would tell us, say, and other weird stuff like that. We also had to do a lot of balancing exercises like walking along balance beams or standing on one foot. We also had to drink this really weird tasting pink Gatorade stuff. I could be wrong, but what else could this be? We were also told never to talk about it. This was in an extremely small town in Tennessee with only about 3,000 residents. The school only had about 150 students, if that. My parents do not recall signing a waiver for this. Also, during some of the tests, they would turn off the lights. So this resonated, I guess, a little bit because I remember the balance beams. I do remember being in a special classroom and being pulled out. And sometimes there were other kids there, and sometimes there weren't. I remember the headphones. I remember a lot of weird noises, like binaural noises. I kind of remember having to remember even in odd patterns. So it's kind of odd. So I definitely kind of resonated with this. And so that's why I included it. I think I was just kind of grabbing things that really resonated. I will tell you, when I was in first grade, I was told by my mom that I kept having incidents where I was staring off and literally like staring off into nothingness and then falling out of my desk. And the desk was connected. It was a desk with the chair connected. And I was literally falling out onto the ground and still staring off in the distance. They didn't know what was wrong with me. I remember I ended up going in for what I thought was epilepsy testing. And this is right before I went into I Am Special, right? And I was in a very dark room, and they, back in the 80s, it was archaic. I had all like little suction cups, and it was a dark room. And I remember on the wall, there was like the paper with the pencil thing that went up and down. I'm guessing it was tracking my brain waves. But I don't remember much, but I do remember laying there, and the room was cold, and there was a, rubbery smell, and me having to lay there while they did whatever test for quote unquote epilepsy. I don't even never know what came of that. I don't know what happened. I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, this other guy, some common themes I've heard: going to a darkened room for a gifted class, maybe in a basement, puzzles, playing chess with adults, singing the I Am Special song, analogies, so many worksheets completing analogies, animal puppets to talk about feelings. So this person responds, weird. I hadn't thought about the analogies worksheets for a long time, but yes, there were so many. I guess that's why I'm so reliant on analogies to understand the world today. That I attended between third and sixth grade in the 90s in a small town in the Western US. My gifted program was at a different school from my own, and a lot of kids were bused from around town to attend one day a week. It was Thursdays, if I recall. Third and fourth graders were together, and then fifth and sixth graders were together. We had class in a modular building outside of the official school building, so it was disconnected from regular classes. We had to go into the main school to use the bathroom and eat in cafeteria. What was weird is this other school was basically an exact replica of my main school I attended, except a little bit backwards. Even the bathrooms were the same color, yellow, and had the same floor, yellow and brown. They both seemed to be built in the 70s. There was really bad fluorescent lighting in the modular building, and I remember my teachers turning the lights off a lot while we worked. I think there were some lava lamps, if I recall. In terms of activities, there were many puzzles and team building activities. I also remember doing things like geometric origami and creating original board games. The emphasis seemed to be on nurturing creative thinking, which, to be honest, is probably one of the only reasons I'm halfway functional with my ADHD. My teachers were two women in their 50s who were pretty kooky and fun. They'd probably be described as witchy today, which is funny because I remember one of my teachers in I Am Special, or one of the people running it, being kind of like an older witchy like lady. I loved going to my original program called PACE, but I moved schools in sixth grade and hated the new gifted program in my new city. The emphasis there was on math and science, not right brain fun like I had before, so I dropped out then. I do somewhat recall an odd testing process to get in that involved some small group and one on one testing in a small windowless room in my original school. I remember being treated well, but remembering blah, 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 I cut it off. Anyways, I just wanted to see, just share information. Sometimes when we share these stories, it triggers stuff. Here's another emblem for gate. Here's another one of these maps. Made by somebody who frequently dreams of mall world. As you can see, very similar to that first one I showed you. Here's this person. I was in it from around first or second grade to sixth grade. The gifted test was in a small room with lots of various puzzles, not jigsaw puzzles, like figuring out how your brain works kind of puzzles. I think he means logic puzzles, right? There were two people in the room with me that did not speak. There was a very clinical feel to it. The puzzles were very easy for me. They never said anything to me, but they told my mom I scored the highest in our school district. I went to the gifted classes a couple times a week for a few hours. It was never creepy. We did things like play Oregon Trail, build robots, write stories, learn about weather, watch black and white movies. We even put on a play about the early US settlers. Now, that said, there were some other tests conducted at my elementary school that are suspicious. I remember a test that had a bright green liquid in white plastic cups. They said they were testing out a new soda. The test conductor came into our room and they named a few students who had to drink it. It wasn't optional. I asked the teacher if I could try it too. I've always been a curious person. She was overly weird about it and scolded me for asking and said no. Maybe it really was soda, but the reason obviously wasn't to test soda flavors. Plus, I remember there were no questions after. They gave the liquid and then watched the kids for a while and then left. So then he says, I learned to read when I was 3. I followed books on tape and taught myself. I was on a third grade reading level by kindergarten, back when you didn't learn to read until first grade. Myself and one boy who eventually went to the gifted class with me were often kept inside during kindergarten recess and taught to read adult books. They were paper pamphlet type books. I just remember sounding out large words I'd never heard and still didn't understand once I read them. The teacher would ask us if we understood what we were reading and had us try to explain what it meant. Odd stuff. Maybe this resonates with someone else. As I've been thinking about this more, I definitely remember some Rorsch tests. I don't know that they were at what they were at the time, but that was part of the initial test and some in the actual classes. So I remember reading advanced books and not understanding the words. I do remember that, but having to sound them out. I also remember Rorsch tests, but however, I was a troublemaker. I don't remember Rorsch tests when I was in I Am Special. I did a lot of specialized testing when, I started getting in trouble from the ages of 12 to 16, but that was, because I was starting fires and stealing shit and getting in fights and stuff. So probably not connected. All right, so here's some other stuff. Who remembers the game Heads Up, 7 Up? Now, I'm not even kidding. We're going to get into the group 7 part of this, right? We talked about gate program. We talked about mall world. Group 7, Heads Up, 7 Up. We would all put our heads down. The room would be dark. We'd put our heads down and you'd have to put your hand up with your thumb up. You couldn't peek, right? Here's kind of what it looked like. Get me out of the way here. So here's your class. You would have one person who was it or whatever, and they would go around in the dark and they would put, or actually, no, I can't remember how it was played. Oh my gosh. I think there was a couple of kids, like 3 or 4 kids who were it, and they would go around and choose one person to put their thumb down. And then they would go stand, I think, in the front of the room. And then the teacher would say, okay, everybody whose thumbs were put down, stand up. And you would have to pick who it was at the front of the room that put your thumb down. It was something like that. I think that's how it was played. I I remember it very vividly. I just don't remember like the dynamics of it, like how many kids and how did it all work. I just remember the lights being off, my head being in my arm. I actually literally can recall like the sensory stimulation and then having my thumb up and getting it pushed down. So the group sevens are they are saying that this game was part of that program and it was like identifying people that had psychic ability and that it was tracked. Like it sounds like it was a game, but somehow it was tracked and reported in the schools that had these special programs. And so they refer to themselves as group seven and they are on the internet. They were ones that were, I guess, guessing time and time again, like the right people, like they psychically were knowing who was pushing down their thumb. And so, like, they kept guessing the right people time and time and again. And so that was flagged and they were brought into the program. Um, so they're called group sevens or whatever. I'm sure there's more to it than that. Like I said, I'm just kind of giving you some base information, but just curious if you guys have any recall on this. But again, some more of these headphones. And then here was another update somebody had done. Um, the test is called something gifted in blah blah blah. All these are the headphones. The pink stuff I had to drink was sodium fluoride. I don't know why. I don't know, but let's see. Was that it? Here's just some clips, different people talking about, gate memories, the tangrams, Group 7 Mall World Gate program, um, Heads Up, 7 Up, the theory there. This lady's on quite a bit. The gate program didn't develop psychic ability, it just found it in kids that it could kind of, I guess, tap into for whatever programming reasons. Um, there's quite a bit out in internet land, you guys. So I just wanted your thoughts on it. I wanted to give you kind of just a brief overview of what Small World, what is the GATE program. I Am Special, called different things, different parts of the country. The Group 7, group online who is connected to GATE, connected to Mall World, the 7 Up, I don't know what it was called, Heads Up, 7 Up people that were flagged for having ability. Anyway, I'm going to close this out and let's talk about it. If it'll let me. There we go. Here we go.